If you'd asked me that morning what my life looked like, I would have answered without thinking. Safe. Not perfect. Not the polished kind of happiness people perform online. Just the steady kind you build with routines, grocery lists, and the quiet certainty that the person sleeping beside you is on your side. Ethan and I had been married long enough that love didn't feel like fireworks anymore. It felt like muscle memory. Like two people moving through the same hallway without bumping, convinced the walls will never shift again around us. That Friday, the house smelled like onions and butter because I started cooking early. My mother was coming. Ethan's brother, Mark, and his wife, Jenna, were coming. And our daughter, Mia, had been buzzing since school because she'd been promoted to official dessert helper. I remember wiping the counter for the third time and thinking how lucky we were to have something this normal. Normal is a privilege you only appreciate after you've lived through chaos. Ethan walked in with a bottle of wine tucked under his arm and kissed my cheek the way he always did. Quick, familiar, safe. "Smells amazing," he said. For a second, I let myself believe he meant us. By 6, the table was full. Plates clinked. My mother told the same story about the time I tried to cut my own bangs in 3rd grade and blamed it on wind. Mark laughed too loud, like he needed everyone to know he was fine. Mia swung her legs under the chair and declared she was old enough to drink sparkling cider like a grown-up. Everyone praised her for being the kind of child who makes adults forget their problems. We talked about ordinary things, Mia's spelling test, Mark's new job, my mother's garden, little annoyances that felt safe to complain about because they didn't matter. If you had walked in then, you would have seen warmth. You would have seen a family that worked. You would have seen me smiling and believed it. But safety has a sound to it, and so does danger. The trouble is, they can be almost identical until you listen twice. The first crack came when my mother asked Ethan how his big project was going. She meant it kindly. Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth, just a pause small enough to miss. Then he smiled and said, "Same old," and pushed the conversation forward like the words were hot. Mark's eyes flicked to Ethan, fast, sharp, and then away. Jenna reached for her water glass with 2 hands like she needed something to hold. I saw it and told myself I was being dramatic. Lately, I'd been catching myself reading too much into tiny things because I was tired. So I swallowed it. Then Mia asked, "Dad, are we still going to Grandma's next month?" Ethan answered too fast. "We'll see," he said, and his voice tightened at the edges. I felt it in my chest before I understood it, a quiet tug, a small alarm. My mother kept talking, and Ethan laughed at the right moments like he was following a script. When he leaned toward Mark to make a comment I couldn't hear, their shoulders formed a casual wall. It made me feel shut out in my own dining room. I told myself, don't ruin a good night with suspicious thoughts. Don't be the kind of woman who finds betrayal in a bowl of mashed potatoes. Still, my eyes kept collecting details. Ethan checked his phone under the table. Mark asked him a question in a voice that dropped low, and Ethan answered without looking at me. Jenna's laugh landed a beat late, like she was translating the room before she joined it. Comfort was on the surface. Underneath, something was moving. After dinner, we cleared plates. My mother stood at the sink, insisting she could wash, and I argued with her the way I always did. Mia begged Mark for a scary story, but not too scary, and he started one about a haunted vending machine that only gave out spinach. Everyone groaned. Everyone smiled. Normal kept performing. Ethan poured more wine, and when he handed Mark his glass, their fingers brushed. Ethan's hand jerked back like he'd been burned. I blinked, and in that blink, the world tilted the way it does right before you lose your balance. "Everything okay?" I asked, light on purpose. "Yeah," Ethan said, smooth and practiced. "Just tired." Tired was his favorite blanket. You could cover distance with tired. You could cover silence. You could cover the way he hadn't touched me in 3 nights without making it sound like something worse. I wanted to believe him. Belief is easier than truth. Mia darted into the living room and came back holding my old phone like a trophy. "Mom, look what I found." "It barely works," I said, laughing. "It does," she insisted. "I charged it and it has a camera." Before I could stop her, she lifted it up, grinning, and started filming the room like she was a tiny director. "Say hi to future us," she sang. We all waved. We all smiled. Ethan smiled too wide, a little stiff, and told her she was adorable. And I smiled with them, thinking this was just another harmless moment we'd forget by morning, not realizing my daughter had just pressed record on the end of my marriage. Mia didn't record the dinner because she was trying to catch anyone. She recorded it the way kids collect shiny things, because it felt fun, because it made her feel important, because she loved the idea that a moment could be kept. She held my old phone with both hands, tongue peeking out between her teeth in concentration, and strutted between chairs like she owned the room. Every time the screen wobbled, she giggled like the wobble was the point. "I'm making a movie," she announced, as if that settled everything. We humored her because that's what adults do when the stakes feel low. When the world seems safe, you hand a child a camera and let them feel powerful. You don't imagine that a child's little game can turn into a match over gasoline. Mia pointed the phone at my mother first. "Interview time. Grandma, say something wise." My mother laughed and leaned toward the lens, eyes bright. "Always wear sunscreen," she said, then added, "and don't marry a man who can't cook." Everyone laughed, including Ethan, a beat too late. At the time, it just sounded like timing. Now, when I think about it, I wonder what he was deciding in that pause, whether to laugh, whether to look offended, whether to show me anything real. Mia spun toward Mark and Jenna. "Uncle Mark, do your scary voice." Mark lowered his tone and told a dramatic story about the haunted vending machine again, stretching it out so Mia squealed and hid behind the phone. Jenna laughed, but her laughter had edges, like she was testing how it would land. She kept glancing at Ethan, like she was waiting for him to react the right way. And I was right there, wiping the table, smiling at all of them, thinking, this is what we'll remember. Not the fights about money, not the tired silences. This, a silly story, a child's laugh, the warmth of family. Mia drifted back to the kitchen, filming my hands as I stacked plates. "Mom is doing the dishes," she narrated in a voice meant for documentaries. "She is a strong woman in her natural habitat." I laughed and flicked water at her. "You better not post that anywhere." "I won't," she promised, offended I'd even suggest it. "It's for us." For us. Those two words landed soft then, like a pillow. I didn't know how sharp they could become. The phone picked up everything. The way the faucet hissed, the scrape of a chair leg, the tiny clink of my wedding ring against a ceramic plate. It picked up the small noises you don't register until they're trapped and replayed. Behind me, in the dining room, Ethan and Mark were talking. I couldn't hear their words clearly over the water, but I heard the shape of the conversation. Short sentences, clipped answers. A laugh that didn't fully open. A hush that followed like someone had shut a door. Mia wandered back out, camera still rolling, and aimed it at her father. "Dad, say something for the movie." Ethan smiled for the lens. It was the same smile he used in family photos. Straight teeth, careful warmth, the kind of expression that said, "Look, I'm a good husband. I'm a good dad." But his eyes didn't reach it. They darted past Mia, past the phone, to Mark, and then away. "Hi, movie," Ethan said. Mia frowned. "That's boring." "I'm boring," he replied, and everyone laughed again because it sounded like a joke. But there was something under it, something brittle, like he was admitting a truth he didn't want to explain. Mia's recording swept across the room, catching faces in quick flashes. My mother at the sink, humming. Jenna leaning against the counter, scrolling her phone with her thumb but not really reading anything. Mark watching Ethan the way you watch a storm you helped form. Mia zoomed in on the dessert she'd made, store-bought cookies arranged on a plate, sprinkled with powdered sugar like she dusted them with snow. "Behold," she whispered dramatically, "my masterpiece." "Chef Mia," I said, and kissed the top of her head. She turned the phone toward me, so close I could see myself reflected in the screen, hair a little frizzy from steam, cheeks flushed from the heat, eyes soft. I looked like a woman inside a story where the biggest problem was whether the cookies were too sweet. "Mom," Mia said, serious now, tell the camera you love Dad." I froze in the smallest way, just a heartbeat too long. It wasn't because I didn't love him. It was because love in that moment felt like a test I hadn't studied for. Ethan's gaze snapped to me. I laughed to cover it. "Of course I love your dad," I said, "and I meant it the way you mean something you've believed for years, automatic, unquestioned, like saying your own name." Ethan exhaled almost silently. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or something darker, the comfort of knowing the mask was still working. Mia beamed and swung the phone back to him. "Dad, tell the camera you love Mom." Ethan's smile stayed in place, but it thinned. "I love your mom," he said, and his voice was warm enough to pass. Warm enough to fool a child. Warm enough to fool me because I wanted to be fooled. Then, somewhere off camera, someone said something too soft for me to catch in the moment, but loud enough for the phone to capture. A name, maybe. A warning. A reminder. Ethan's head turned slightly, just enough. Mark's shoulders stiffened. Jenna's laugh stopped mid-breath. Mia didn't notice. She kept recording, oblivious and glowing, panning across the room like she was painting us into permanence. When the night ended, I kissed my mother goodbye, hugged Jenna, and thanked Mark for coming. Ethan gathered empty glasses. Mia, exhausted, set the phone on the couch and ran upstairs to brush her teeth, humming to herself. I picked up the phone to plug it in, mostly so it wouldn't die, mostly so Mia wouldn't cry in the morning. The screen showed a tiny thumbnail of the video, a frozen moment of all of us smiling. I didn't press play. Why would I? It felt like putting away leftovers, nothing dangerous, nothing worth revisiting later. It was just a family dinner, just noise and laughter and ordinary love. So I tucked the phone onto the charger and turned off the lights, unaware that the recording was still there, quietly waiting for the day I would finally listen. I didn't choose the moment, the recording chose me. It happened on a Tuesday night ordinary enough to vanish. Mia was asleep upstairs, her door cracked the way she liked it, a thin line of hallway light guarding her from the dark. Ethan was in the shower. I was in the living room folding socks, mind drifting in that quiet space where nothing feels urgent. My old phone sat on the side table, still plugged in from the dinner. Mia had begged to watch her movie after school, then forgotten it the second her game loaded. I told myself I'd delete the video later. I told myself it was just clutter. Then the screen lit up with a preview, and there it was. Our dining room, all of us smiling like people with nothing to hide. I don't know why I tapped it. Curiosity, maybe, the harmless kind. The kind that believes there's no trap inside your home. The video opened with Mia's laughter, bright and close, and the camera swung wildly, ceiling, wall, my mother's hands, a blur of plates. I smiled without meaning to. It was sweet, proof the night had been real, that we'd been happy in at least one frame of time. "Interview time," Mia chirped, and my mother delivered the sunscreen joke. I heard Ethan laugh late, like always, and felt a small sting of tenderness anyway. Marriage does that. It lets you be annoyed and in love at the same time, filing away little disappointments while still believing the whole structure is solid. I let the video play like background music while I folded. Mark did his haunted vending machine voice. Jenna laughed. The faucet ran. My ring clinked against a plate. The house sounded alive. And then, about 9 minutes in, the sound changed. Not dramatically, just a thinning like the room held its breath. Mia wandered away and the phone, set down on the couch, kept recording without anyone performing for it. No big smiles, no say hi to the movie. Just voices, rougher around the edges. At first it was muffled. I leaned closer, instinctively, the way you lean toward a whisper. Ethan's voice came through, lower, tight. Mark answered him. Jenna said something soft, and then there was a silence that felt deliberate. The kind of silence that happens when someone checks whether another person is listening. My hand stopped moving. One sock hung from my fingers. I told myself it was nothing. Family talk, work, money. People don't realize how strange they sound when they're half off camera. Then I heard my own name. Not the way Ethan usually said it, sweet, casual, familiar. This was clipped. irritated, like my name was a problem he was tired of carrying. "Don't say it like that," Mark muttered. Ethan exhaled, sharp. "I'm just saying the truth. She can't find out." Find out what? The words hit my body before my mind could catch them. My stomach tightened. Heat crawled up my neck. I paused the video so fast my thumb slipped, and for a second the screen froze on Mia's powdered sugar masterpiece, innocent and white. The shower was still running down the hall. Ethan was still there, humming. My finger hovered over play. I wanted to unhear what I'd heard. I wanted to rewind my life to 5 seconds ago, when my biggest worry was whether Mia would remember her library book. I pressed play. Jenna's voice, light but strained. "She thinks you're just tired." "Mark, this is getting messy." "Ethan, it's not messy if everyone sticks to the plan." "Plan." I swallowed, and it sounded loud in my own ears. Mark again, quieter. "What if she hears it? What if she—" Ethan cut him off. "She won't, she trusts me." There was a laugh after that. Not Mia's, not my mother. Ethan's laugh, short, dark, private. A laugh I'd never heard in bed, never heard in the kitchen while he made coffee. It sounded like a stranger, borrowing my husband's throat. I rewound 10 seconds and played it again. "She won't, she trusts me." Again. My brain sprinted to save me. Surprise party, a gift, my mother's health, anything. It offered explanations the way a drowning person grabs at floating debris. But the conversation kept going, and every line pushed me farther from safety. "Jenna, and the messages, did you delete them?" "Ethan, of course I did." "Mark, you said you ended it." Ethan's voice sharpened. "I ended what needed to be ended." My lungs stopped doing their job. I sat down hard on the couch, socks spilling onto the carpet. "Messages. Ended it. Plan." The words were simple, but the meaning behind them felt huge and rotten, like opening a door and finding the house hollowed out. I rewound again, desperate for a sentence that would rescue me. But the replays only made the pauses clearer. The way Mark hesitated, the way Jenna tightened when she said my name, the way Ethan sounded calm, like he'd lived with this long enough that it didn't scare him. Then came the line that split me open. Mark said, "If she finds out about the hotel." Ethan interrupted, low and final. "She won't, and if she does, I'll handle it, like I always do." I stared at the screen until it blurred. I felt like I was watching my life from underwater, everything slow and distorted, everything familiar turned alien. The shower shut off. The sudden hush in the house made me flinch. I stabbed the pause button, too late, as if sound could be stuffed back into the phone. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Footsteps in the hallway. Ethan's footsteps. The same footsteps that had crossed this floor 1,000 nights. Now they sounded like a warning. I locked the phone, set it face down, and forced my hands to keep folding socks like nothing had changed. My fingers didn't feel like mine. They felt borrowed. Ethan walked in, towel around his waist, hair dripping. "You still up?" he asked, easy. I looked at him and saw 2 people at once, my husband and the man on the recording. Familiar face, alien meaning. "Yeah," I managed, "just finishing this." He smiled and leaned down to kiss the top of my head, the way he always did. His lips were warm. The gesture was gentle. It was the exact shape of comfort. And it made me nauseous. Because I knew now, knew in my bones, that the danger wasn't outside our house. It was in it. It was standing right in front of me, smelling like soap, acting like love. When he walked upstairs, I waited until the bedroom door closed. Then I picked up the phone again, hands trembling, and played the hotel line one more time. The words came through, clear. And in that moment, the marriage I thought I had didn't end with a fight or a confession. It ended with playback. What I heard demanded an explanation. But the most terrifying part was this. The only person who could explain it was also the person who had the most reason to lie. The next morning, sunlight poured into our kitchen like nothing had happened. That was the first insult. Coffee still smelled like coffee, Mia still patted in half awake asking for cereal. Ethan still moved around the room like a man with nothing to confess. My brain wanted to match the light. It wanted to believe the recording had been a trick of sound, a stitch in my imagination, something I could shake off if I stayed busy enough. I told myself I'd misheard. Hotel could mean anything. A meeting, a venue, a joke I didn't catch. People say dumb things at family dinners. The phone was old, the microphone crackled. Maybe the audio made it worse. Maybe Ethan's laugh only sounded cruel because the speaker was tinny. Maybe was the safest word I owned. By lunchtime, my body was betraying me too. I rinsed a mug and forgot what I was holding. I reread the same email 3 times without understanding it. Every time I heard Ethan's car in the driveway, my pulse jumped like I'd done something wrong. I opened our calendar app, scrolling through hotel dates in my head, searching for an explanation, conference, wedding, work trip, anything that would let me stay married to the man I recognized. Ethan kissed me before work and asked if I wanted him to pick up anything for dinner. His hand rested on my hip for a second, familiar weight, and I felt my body lean toward him like it always had. Habit is loyal even when your mind is. Then the memory of his voice, "She trusts me," rose up, and my skin went cold under his palm. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," I said, and the lie tasted like pennies. All day I moved through chores and emails and Mia's school forms like a woman pretending her house wasn't on fire. I caught myself staring at Ethan's text messages, "Love you. Be home at 6. Simple. Domestic. Proof my heart argued that I was overreacting. Because love is a historian. It keeps the highlights, edits the rest. It showed me Ethan teaching Mia to ride a bike, jogging beside her, steadying her seat with one hand while she screamed with laughter. It showed me the night he held my face and promised we were a team after my father died. It showed me our wedding video, his eyes wet when he said vows like he believed in them more than gravity. That Ethan didn't sound like the Ethan on the recording. By afternoon, I'd convinced myself the recording was missing context. I would bring it up gently, I decided. Not a confrontation, just a question. But every time I pictured saying the word hotel out loud, my throat locked. If I named it, it would become real. And if it became real, it would have to end in something, an explanation, an explosion, a divorce. I wasn't ready to lose the life I'd been living, just because of a few sentences caught on an old phone. That night, after Mia was asleep and Ethan was upstairs, finishing something for work, I went back to the recording like a person returning to a bruise. I told myself I was only checking, only making sure. I held the phone close, volume low, as if secrecy could soften what I heard. I rewound to the start of the off-camera conversation. "She thinks you're just tired. This is getting messy. Everyone sticks to the plan." Each line landed the same, no matter how softly I played it. The words didn't change. Only my excuses did. Plan could mean a surprise, I argued. Maybe Mark and Jenna were helping Ethan plan a trip. Maybe the hotel was for a weekend away. Maybe they were embarrassed because money was tight. Maybe they were planning something for Mia. Then Ethan's laugh came again, and my stomach lurched. It wasn't a celebration laugh. It was a laugh that closed doors. I stared at our framed family photo, Mia between us at the park, Ethan's arm around my shoulders, my smile wide and unquestioning. I tried to imagine that picture as a lie. My mind refused. It rewrote the recording instead. "You're paranoid," I told myself. "You've been stressed. You're making meaning out of static because you're afraid of being alone. You're about to destroy your daughter's home over a sound bite." And then another voice, quieter but steadier, answered. "Or you're about to save her from learning that love means swallowing betrayal." I didn't sleep much. I drifted in shallow layers, waking every time Ethan shifted beside me. Each time I listened to his breathing and felt like I was lying next to a secret. In the dark, he reached for me, arm heavy over my waist, and my body tensed before I could stop it. He murmured my name, half asleep, and the tenderness in his voice almost convinced me I'd dreamed the whole thing. In the morning, he made pancakes with chocolate chips because Mia liked them. He flipped them with that small flourish he always did to make her clap. My brain watched him like a jury. My heart watched him like a spouse. "What's with the pancakes?" I asked, trying to sound playful. He smiled. Just felt like it. Just felt like it, or just needed it. A gesture, a cover, a way to push the story back into normal. By the third day, denial wasn't a choice anymore. It was a system. I built it out of routines, out of smiles, out of the way Mia ran into Ethan's arms after school. Every time I pictured the word affair, my mind shoved it away like a hand slamming a drawer. But denial has limits. It frays when you tug it too often. On Thursday, Ethan's phone buzzed while he was in the shower. I wasn't trying to snoop. It was sitting on the counter, screen lighting up with a message preview. I only saw the first 2 words before it disappeared. Last night. 2 words and my chest went tight. Last night from who? About what? My eyes stayed on the blank screen like it might confess the rest. That was when I understood. I could spend the rest of my life arguing with a recording, or I could start looking for what it was pointing to. The innocence of Mia's movie had already pulled me across a line. I could still pretend I didn't know, but the cost of pretending was starting to feel like it would be me. I told myself I wasn't investigating. I told myself I was simply paying attention, the way any wife would if her life suddenly sounded different when played back. But attention, once sharpened by fear, turns into something else. It becomes a flashlight. And a flashlight, pointed at the corners of a room, will eventually show you what's been living there. I started with the recording again, not because it offered comfort, but because it offered anchors. I listened with my eyes closed, mapping the voices, the pauses, the way Mark said messy like he meant consequences, not inconvenience. I wrote the phrases down in my notes app like they were clues in a case I didn't want to solve. Plan, messages, hotel, handle it. I rewound until the words lost all warmth and became bare facts. Then I watched Ethan. I'd been watching him for months without calling it that. He brought his phone into the bathroom. He angled his screen away when I walked into the room. I'd called it stress. I'd called it anything but betrayal because betrayal felt too dramatic for our small life. Now I noticed everything. When he texted, he held his phone low, thumb moving fast, and when I asked who it was, he answered with a smile that arrived a second late. When he left for work, he checked his pockets twice. Wallet, keys, phone. Like those 3 things were the only parts of him he couldn't afford to misplace. When Mia climbed into his lap, he hugged her tight, and I couldn't tell if he was holding on because she was innocent or because she made him look like the man he wanted to be. Curiosity fought with fear inside me. Curiosity said, "Look closer." Fear said, "If you look, you'll find it. And if you find it, you'll have to live in a world where your husband's voice can sound like a stranger's." So I moved carefully, like stepping through a house at night, one floorboard at a time, praying nothing creaks. I started with calendars and timelines because numbers feel safer than feelings. Ethan had a work calendar synced to our family one, supposedly for transparency. I opened it and scrolled back 3 months, looking for anything that matched the word hotel. Late client call, and a 2-day training he'd mentioned only once, as if it weren't worth remembering. I checked my own texts from that week. I had written, "Miss you. Mia asked when you'll be home." He'd replied, "Long day, don't wait up." That night, I'd watched TV alone, convinced I was being supportive. Now I stared at the date like it was a bruise coming back to the surface. The next thread was Mark. We'd always been friendly, not close. At dinner, he'd laughed too hard and watched Ethan too closely. On the recording, he sounded worried, almost angry. I scrolled through my texts with him, mostly family logistics, until I found a message from 2 weeks earlier that I'd barely registered. "You good?" I'd answered, "Fine, why?" He'd replied, "Just checking." 2 words that suddenly felt heavy, like he'd seen something and didn't know how to name it. The third thread was Jenna. Jenna had always been polite in that careful way that feels like distance wrapped in manners. On the recording, she'd said, "She thinks you're just tired," like she'd been observing me, filing me into categories. Wife, trusting, easy to manage. I remembered one moment with Jenna I'd shrugged off. "So, you and Ethan are good, right?" she asked, smiling too brightly. At the time, I'd laughed. Of course we're good. Why wouldn't we be? Now I heard it again, and it sounded like guilt trying to disguise itself as concern. I became a collector of small things. A receipt in Ethan's pocket for coffee in a part of town he never visited. A new password prompt on his laptop where there hadn't been one before. A sudden interest in cologne he'd never worn. None of it was a confession. All of it was a chorus. The hardest part was pretending. Mia needed breakfast, homework help, a ride to soccer. She needed me to laugh at her jokes and listen to her school stories like they were the most important thing in the world. So I did. I smiled and nodded and asked Ethan about his day as if the word hotel hadn't planted itself in my ribs. Some nights after everyone was asleep, I opened the recording again and listened for anything I'd missed. It was a cruel ritual, like reopening a wound to make sure it still hurt. I started to hear layers, tone, breath, the way Mark said ended it like he didn't believe it. I heard Ethan say, "I'll handle it," and realized he'd said versions of that to me for years. I'll handle it. I'll take care of it. Trust me. I'd mistaken control for care because it came packaged as competence. On Friday, I did something that made my hands shake. I checked our bank account. Not because money was the main betrayal, but because money is where secrets leave fingerprints. I scanned recent charges, groceries, utilities, Mia's dance shoes, and then one I didn't recognize, a boutique hotel downtown. One night, a number large enough to sting. My vision narrowed. I clicked into the details. The date matched the October training. I wanted to wake Ethan and demand an explanation right then, to throw the phone and the statement on the bed and watch him scramble. But Mia was sleeping down the hall, and I could almost see her face if she heard yelling, confused, scared, blaming herself because children always blame themselves. So I swallowed the urge and kept breathing through it. Maybe there was an explanation, my mind whispered even now. Maybe the company booked it. Maybe. But the charge was on our card. Our money, our life. I took a screenshot and sent it to myself from a new email address, the kind of small secret that changes who you think you are. The secrecy tasted wrong, like I was becoming the thing I hated. But the truth had already pushed me into this shape. I wasn't choosing to be suspicious. I was choosing not to be naive. That weekend, I watched Ethan in a new way. When he played with Mia, I saw a father. When he kissed me, I saw a performer. When he laughed at a joke, I listened for the darkness underneath. He asked me Sunday night if everything was okay. He said I seemed quiet lately. Quiet, like my silence was a problem he could solve with one question. "I'm fine," I told him, and the lie slid out smoother than it should have. Just a lot on my mind. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to scrolling on his phone. That was when the loneliness hit hardest. Not because I was alone in the room, but because I was alone in the truth. I couldn't tell my mother without shattering her opinion of Ethan. I couldn't tell Mia without breaking her. I couldn't tell friends without making it real. So I carried it by myself, heavier each day, until it started to feel too large for one body. I was running out of air. And somewhere under the fear, a different feeling began to form. Sharp, clear, almost calm. If there was a plan, I would learn it. If there were messages, I would find them. If there was a hotel, I would walk into the truth with my eyes open. Because the recording hadn't just exposed my husband. It had exposed my own choice. Keep pretending, or start pulling, even if the whole sweater unraveled in my hands. I didn't plan the confrontation like people do in movies, with a suitcase packed and a perfect speech memorized. I didn't have a dramatic soundtrack or a neat ending waiting at the door. I had a recording on an old phone, a hotel charge on our shared card, and a heart that felt like it had been dropped and stepped on, and then expected to keep beating politely. For days, I told myself I needed the right moment, a calm moment, a safe moment, but the truth doesn't wait for your schedule. It swells inside you until silence becomes unbearable. The moment came on a Monday night when Mia fell asleep early, worn out from soccer and homework. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and watched her breathing settle into that soft, untroubled rhythm children have when they still believe the world is stable. Her door stayed cracked, the thin line of light still protecting her. Downstairs, Ethan sat on the couch with his laptop open, scrolling, half watching a game. He looked comfortable, feet up, one arm draped along the back cushion like he owned the air in the room. The same man who had said, "She trusts me," as if my trust was a tool he could use and put away. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, just looking at him. I was surprised by how normal he appeared. That was the scariest part. Betrayal didn't make him monstrous. It made him ordinary. "Hey," he said without looking up. "You coming to bed soon?" My mouth went dry. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, loud as a warning. I took one step forward, then another, like walking into cold water. "We need to talk," I said. He finally looked up. His expression shifted, small, quick, practiced. Concern, then annoyance masked as concern. "About what?" I sat in the armchair across from him, leaving space between us on purpose. Distance felt like safety. I held the old phone in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have, like it contained more than video, like it contained the end of something. "Do you remember dinner at Mom's?" I asked. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Yeah, why?" "Mia recorded it." A flicker crossed his face. Not confusion, recognition. It was gone fast, but I saw it. My stomach turned. He forced a laugh. "Okay, she records everything." I nodded. I watched it. He leaned back, too casual. "Cute, right?" I didn't answer. Instead, I unlocked the phone and scrolled to the timestamp. My thumb hovered over play. My hand shook so badly I had to hold my wrist with my other hand. Ethan's gaze tracked the phone like it was a weapon. "What are you doing?" he asked, and there was a sharpness now, an edge he hadn't bothered to soften. "I heard you," I said. Silence settled between us, thick and deliberate. He blinked. "Heard me what?" I pressed play. At first it was harmless. Mia's laughter, the clink of plates, my mother's joke. Ethan's shoulders loosened, and for a second I wondered if I'd imagined everything after all, if I'd built a nightmare out of static. Then we reached the part where Mia set the phone down, and the room stopped performing. Ethan's voice came through, low and tight. "She can't find out." His head snapped toward the speaker. I watched the color drain from his face like someone pulled a plug. I didn't pause it. I couldn't. It felt like stopping would give him room to breathe, room to shape a lie. Mark's voice, Jenna's voice. The words I'd replayed until they burned. Plan, messages, ended it, hotel. Ethan's laugh, short, dark, filled the room. He flinched like he'd been slapped by his own sound. When Mark said, "If she finds out about the hotel," Ethan cut him off, and the sentence landed like a hammer. "She won't, and if she does, I'll handle it, like I always do." I stopped the video there. The air felt thin. My chest hurt like I'd been running. Ethan stared at me for a moment like he didn't recognize me. Then he stood up, fast, and the sudden movement made me jerk back in the chair. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "It's you," I said, voice shaking. "It's your voice. It's you talking about me like I'm stupid." He stepped closer. His eyes were wide, but not with guilt, with calculation, with anger that his private world had been dragged into the light. "You're spying on me now," he snapped. The word hit me wrong. Spying. As if I'd broken something sacred by listening to my own family dinner. "It was on the phone," I said. "Our daughter recorded it." "I didn't." "You always twist things," he cut in, and his voice rose just enough to feel dangerous. "You hear one thing and turn it into a whole story." I stared at him, stunned. "I didn't twist anything. You said hotel. You said messages. You said I can't find out. Ethan, what am I supposed to think?" He spread his hands, performing disbelief. "It was a joke." "A joke," I repeated, and my voice cracked on the word. "Explain it then." He shook his head like I was exhausting. "Mark was talking about work, about a conference. We were messing around." I felt my face go hot. "A conference you hid from me, on our card." His eyes flickered. Again, recognition, then the quick scramble of someone searching for the next lie. "What are you talking about?" "The hotel charge," I said. "Downtown, October, the weekend you said you had training." He stared at me like he couldn't believe I dared to look. Then his jaw tightened, and I saw it, the moment he decided to switch tactics. "Oh my God," he said, low, disgusted. "So you went through our finances now too?" "Our finances," I repeated. "That's what you're mad about, not that you lied." "I didn't lie," he snapped. "And you don't get to interrogate me like I'm some criminal." My hands curled into fists in my lap. I forced myself to keep my voice steady, because if I started screaming, he'd call me crazy. I could feel him waiting for that, waiting for me to break so he could label me the problem. "Ethan," I said carefully, "I'm not trying to fight. I'm trying to understand what I heard. I'm trying to understand why my husband is talking about handling me." He leaned down, face close, eyes cold. "You're hearing what you want to hear," he whispered. "You always do." The words were quiet, but they carried a threat. A reminder of the power he thought he had, the power to rewrite reality. I swallowed. "So you're saying it's nothing?" "It's nothing," he said, louder now, confident. "It's a private conversation you weren't meant to hear." I stared at him and something in me steadied. Private conversation, not denial, not innocence, private. "So there was something," I said. "Something you weren't meant to let me hear." His nostrils flared. He turned away, packing like he was the victim. "I can't believe you," he muttered. "I come home, I work, I provide, and this is what you do. You set traps." "A trap," my voice rose despite myself. "Our daughter recorded dinner. You said I can't find out. What can I find out, Ethan?" He spun back, eyes blazing. "Because you blow up over nothing," he shouted. The volume made me glance toward the stairs, terrified Mia might wake. Ethan didn't glance. He didn't care in that moment who else heard. "I didn't want you finding out because you always make everything dramatic," he continued, voice sharp. "You always turn people against me. I was trying to protect us." Protect us. There it was, the most poisonous lie. The kind that comes dressed in love so you don't notice the knife. "Protect us from what?" I asked, and my voice went dangerously calm. "From the truth." He hesitated, just a blink, a crack. Then he attacked again. "You're not stable lately," he said. "You've been paranoid, you've been cold. Maybe you need to talk to someone, this isn't healthy." I felt like I'd been pushed underwater. He was doing it, turning it onto me, making my reaction the crime, not his actions. I stood up, hands shaking, and held the phone out between us like evidence. "Stop," I said. "Just stop. Tell me the truth. Were you with someone?" His face hardened. "No." "Were you messaging someone?" "No." "Were you at that hotel with someone?" He laughed again, short, bitter. "Unbelievable." "Answer me." He stepped closer. "You want to destroy this family, because that's what you're doing. You're taking a harmless conversation and trying to burn everything down." Harmless? That word scraped at my throat. Harmless didn't sound like "she can't find out." Harmless didn't sound like plan. Harmless didn't sound like a man laughing at his wife's trust. I shook my head slowly. "You're not even denying that you said it," I whispered. "You're just trying to make me feel wrong for hearing it." His eyes narrowed. "Maybe you are wrong." I stared at him and realized, with a clarity that hurt, that this wasn't just about a hotel. This was about control, about how easily he expected my reality to bend around his comfort. I thought about the nights I'd apologized first just to end a fight, the times I'd swallowed questions because he'd sigh and call me sensitive, the way I'd started checking my own feelings like they needed permission to exist. And I understood the betrayal wasn't new. The recording hadn't created it, it had exposed it. I took a step back toward the hallway, toward the stairs where my daughter slept. My voice came out small but firm. "I'm not doing this with you," I said. "Not like this." He scoffed. "So what, you're leaving?" "I don't know," I said, and that was the first true sentence I'd spoken in days. "But I know I'm not crazy." His expression shifted again, anger to something like fear, and then quickly to contempt. "Fine," he snapped. "Believe whatever you want." I held his gaze. "I'm going to," I said. That night the marriage survived in the technical sense. We still lived in the same house. Mia still slept upstairs. The walls still stood. But the truth had entered the room, and nothing, no gaslighting, no yelling, no pretending, could make it leave again. The morning after the confrontation, the house didn't look different. That was the cruelest part. The same dish towel hung from the oven handle. The same cereal boxes sat crooked in the pantry. The same family photo smiled from the hallway wall, Ethan's arm around me, Mia's grin bright as a promise. Everything looked like a life that still made sense. But sound had changed. Silence had changed. Even the air between us felt rearranged, like furniture moved in the dark. Ethan woke before me and didn't touch me, not even by accident. He dressed quietly, buttoning his shirt with sharp, efficient movements, the way you move when you're trying to prove you don't care. When he walked past the bed, he didn't look down. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to his footsteps leave the room, and felt something inside me grieving before the day even started. Grief for the marriage, yes, but also grief for my own certainty. The old me would have reached for him, would have tried to fix it with softness. The new me didn't know how to hold a man who looked at truth like it was an enemy. In the kitchen, Mia bounced in wearing her soccer shirt, hair sticking up in the back. She looked at us with the innocent confidence of a child who believes her parents are the walls of the world. "Pancakes?" she asked, hopeful. Ethan forced a smile. "Not today, kiddo. We're running late." His voice was light, but I heard the effort underneath it, like he was dragging the tone into place. I poured Mia's cereal and kept my own hands busy so my face wouldn't betray me. Every small movement felt staged. Every glance felt dangerous. Mia talked about school, about a new girl who liked the same book series, about how she wanted to be the fastest runner ever. Ethan nodded at the right moments, phone in hand, eyes flicking down like he couldn't bear to stay present too long. He kissed Mia's forehead before they left. "Love you," he said, warm. Then he looked at me. The space between us widened without either of us moving. His eyes were guarded, hard around the edges. "We'll talk later," he said. It wasn't a promise. It was a warning. The front door shut. The house went quiet, and I stood there holding a spoon, realizing I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I'd named what I heard. He'd chosen not to explain it. Now we were living in the wreckage of that choice. For the next few days, our home became a place of cold logistics. Who's picking up Mia? Did you pay the electric bill? Where's the permission slip? We spoke like coworkers sharing a project, careful not to brush against anything emotional, because emotion might ignite. At night, Ethan stayed downstairs working. I stayed upstairs with Mia, reading to her, letting her ask me questions about her day, letting her curl against me like she always had. Sometimes she'd glance toward the stairs and ask, "Is Dad mad?" "No," I'd lie, because the truth was too sharp for her small hands. But kids feel weather changes. Mia started hovering more, like she was trying to keep us close with her presence. She'd ask Ethan to play a game and then watch his face while he played, monitoring the way he smiled, as if she could measure safety by the shape of his mouth. I hated that. I hated that my daughter's innocence had become her job, to manage a room she shouldn't have to manage. And I hated myself, too, in the quiet hours. Because guilt is a jealous companion. It whispered that the recording was my fault, that if I hadn't listened, Mia would still be laughing without tension. But then another voice answered, steady and stern. If your marriage ended because of a recording, it was already ending. The truth didn't destroy it. The truth revealed it. Still, the grief came in waves. I grieved the version of Ethan I thought I knew. The man who carried groceries in with one arm and Mia on his hip with the other. The man who used to rub my shoulders when I was tired. The man I believed would never talk about me like a problem to handle. I grieved the life I'd built my identity around, wife, partner, team. When you've been someone's for years, it's terrifying to realize you might have to become me again. Ethan, meanwhile, acted like the injured party, the one betrayed. His anger simmered under everything. Slam a cabinet a little too hard, speak a little too sharply, correct me in front of Mia in that casual way meant to make me feel small without appearing cruel. "You forgot her water bottle," he'd say, loud enough for Mia to hear, and then he'd look at me like I'd failed some test. I wanted to scream, "You forgot your vows." But I kept my voice level because Mia was always there, always absorbing. One night after Mia fell asleep mid-story, I went downstairs and found Ethan on the couch, eyes on the TV but not really watching. The glow lit his face in pale flickers. He looked tired, haunted, even. For a moment, I almost softened. "Are you going to tell me?" I asked quietly. He didn't look away from the screen. "Tell you what?" "The truth," I said. My hands were steady now, which scared me more than the shaking. "About the hotel, about the messages, about the plan." He exhaled, irritated. "We already talked about this." "No," I said. "You talked around it." He turned the volume down but didn't turn the TV off. That detail, keeping the noise, felt deliberate, like he needed a buffer between us so nothing could land fully. "You're obsessed," he said. "You've decided I'm guilty, so nothing I say matters." "Then say it anyway," I replied. "Look me in the eyes and explain why you said I can't find out." His jaw tightened. He finally looked at me. His eyes held something like contempt and something like fear, tangled together. "Because you'll take anything and ruin everything," he said. "That's what you do." My chest tightened. The old me might have apologized, might have scrambled to prove I wasn't that kind of woman. The new me simply stared back, letting the accusation hang in the air where it belonged, with him. "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "You did." His face flushed. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," I whispered. "Not when you're still lying." That was the moment the temperature changed. His anger sharpened, focused. He stood up, towering over me, not with violence exactly, but with intimidation. The kind of physical presence meant to remind you who holds power. "I'm done with this," he said. "If you keep pushing, you're going to regret it." Regret it? The words were quiet, threatening without being explicit, a line drawn just far enough back to deny. My stomach turned to ice. Is that supposed to scare me? He stared for a beat too long, then looked away. "Go to bed." I went upstairs shaking, not because I didn't expect conflict, but because I realized how easily love can become a weapon when someone uses your trust like leverage. After that night, something in me shifted. I stopped asking for the truth like it was a favor he might grant. I started seeing the pattern: deflect, deny, attack, make me question myself, make me feel guilty for reacting. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the insistence that I had no right to respond to it. Meanwhile, life kept demanding normalcy. Mia had practice, homework, a school project about family trees that made my throat close up when she asked, "Do I put both of you on the same branch?" "Yes," I said quickly. "Of course." But even as I said it, I didn't know if it was true. At night, I lay in bed alone, listening to Ethan's footsteps downstairs, and felt the strangest combination of heartbreak and clarity. Togetherness had become proximity without connection. Our marriage was now a house where two people lived and one child tried to keep the lights on. I began to understand that I wasn't just deciding whether to forgive or leave. I was deciding who I would become in the aftermath. The woman who accepted a life built on half-truths, or the woman who chose herself even when it cost everything familiar. And once that question took root, it didn't stop growing. There's a moment in every unraveling where you realize you've been living on pause. Not the obvious kind, where boxes are packed and lawyers are called and the world knows. The quieter kind, where you still make lunches and pay bills and smile at your child, but inside you're suspended between two futures. One where you stay and pretend the cracks are normal. One where you leave and admit the whole foundation was compromised. For weeks, I existed in that suspension. Every morning, I watched Mia walk into the kitchen and felt the weight of her presence settle onto my decision like a stone. She didn't ask for any of this. She didn't ask to become the accidental witness to adult secrets. She didn't ask for a house full of careful tones and closed doors. And yet, when I looked at her, my first instinct was still the same: protect her, keep her world steady, keep the roof over her head intact. The problem was, the roof wasn't intact anymore. It only looked that way from the street. At night, when the house went quiet, I tried to picture both paths honestly. If I stayed, what would staying look like? It would look like swallowing questions until they turned into bitterness. It would look like teaching Mia, without meaning to, that love means tolerating lies as long as the bills get paid and the family photo stays on the wall. It would look like years of Ethan's calm voice insisting I was dramatic, and my own voice growing smaller to make room for his. If I left, what would leaving look like? It would look like Mia's tears when she realized Dad wouldn't be here every morning. It would look like splitting holidays and explaining things I didn't want to explain. It would look like financial fear, loneliness, and the silent judgment of people who prefer marriages to stay pretty, even when they're poisonous underneath. Both futures scared me. The difference was this: one required me to abandon myself. I didn't tell anyone at first. Secrets thrive in isolation, but so does shame. I was afraid that if I spoke out loud, if I said the word betrayal in a room where someone else could hear it, I'd become the woman with the broken home. The woman who couldn't make it work. So I carried it quietly, like a bruised rib under a coat. Then my mother called on a Saturday morning and asked, casually, "How's Ethan? He seemed tense the other night." That question cracked something open. I stared at the sink while water ran, the sound reminding me of the recording, and felt tears rise unexpectedly. My mother didn't know. She still believed in the version of Ethan that smiled politely at family dinners and washed his hands before helping Mia with dessert. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Sweetheart," she replied, gentle, "you didn't answer my question." I closed my eyes. A part of me wanted to tell her everything. Another part wanted to protect her from the disappointment that would follow. Because betrayal doesn't only break the person it happens to. It sends fractures through everyone who believed in the story. "I don't know," I admitted. "We're having a rough patch." My mother sighed. "Marriage has rough patches. You work through them, especially for the child." Especially for the child. The sentence landed like a commandment. I knew she meant well. She came from a generation where endurance was praised and self-respect was a luxury. Where women stayed because leaving was worse than suffering quietly. Where stability was a trophy you earned by swallowing pain. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the old phone charging on the table. Mia had moved on from the movie. She didn't even remember it existed. But it existed, waiting, like truth always does. A few days later, I met my friend Talia for coffee. We'd been friends since college, the kind of friend who could read your face before you spoke. I tried to keep it light. Work, kids, weather, but my smile kept slipping. "You look like you're carrying a secret," she said, stirring her drink. I laughed too quickly. "No." Talia's eyes softened. "Try again." And just like that, the dam cracked. Not fully, not dramatically, just enough to let air in. "I heard something," I said, voice low, "on a recording." Her brows pulled together. "What kind of recording?" "Our daughter recorded a family dinner," I said. The irony stung as soon as the words left my mouth. "And later I listened, and I heard Ethan talking about me, like he didn't want me to find something out." Talia didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to fix it. She just listened, which felt like someone handing me a blanket in a cold room. I told her about the hotel charge, about the way he'd reacted, about the gaslighting, the way he made my reaction the problem. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking around the paper cup. Talia's voice was quiet. "Do you feel safe?" The question startled me because it wasn't the one I'd been asking myself. I'd been asking, can I prove it? Can I forgive it? Can I hold the family together? "Safe." "I don't think he'd hit me," I said, and hated how low the bar sounded. Talia didn't flinch. "That's not the only kind of unsafe," she said. "Do you feel emotionally safe? Do you feel like you can tell the truth in your own house?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Because the answer was no, and saying it felt like stepping off a ledge. Talia reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "Staying isn't noble if it kills you slowly," she said, "and leaving isn't failure if it saves you." Those words followed me home like a heartbeat. That night, Ethan acted almost normal. He helped Mia with homework. He asked about my day. He even washed the dishes without being asked, like he was trying to restore the old rhythm. For a moment, the temptation hit, strong and sweet. The temptation to accept the performance as proof, to treat his politeness as repentance, to pretend that if we just moved forward, the recording would fade into the past. But when I looked at him across the kitchen, I didn't feel comfort. I felt calculation. I realized he hadn't apologized once. Not for the words, not for the secrecy, not for the way he'd threatened regret. He hadn't shown remorse, only irritation that I knew. And that was the difference between a marriage that can be rebuilt and one that is simply being managed. After Mia went to bed, I walked into our bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept important papers, passports, birth certificates, insurance documents. My hands moved on their own, calm and precise, as if my body had already decided what my mind was still afraid to admit. I pulled out Mia's birth certificate and stared at her name. My daughter, my responsibility, my heart. Then I pulled out our marriage certificate and felt something inside me go still. A piece of paper could say we were bound, but it couldn't say we were safe. It couldn't say we were honest. It couldn't say we were good. Ethan appeared in the doorway, watching. "What are you doing?" he asked. I didn't jump this time. I didn't rush to soothe him. I didn't apologize for existing in my own truth. "I'm thinking," I said. He scoffed. "About what? Are we still doing this?" I looked up at him, really looked, and felt a strange clarity settle into my bones. "Yes," I said simply, "we are." His eyes narrowed. "You're making a big mistake." Maybe, but I realized something in that moment. Staying had become the bigger mistake, because it required me to shrink until I fit inside his version of reality. I closed the drawer and stood, papers in my hand, heart pounding but steady. "I can't live like this," I said. "Not with you denying what I heard, not with you trying to make me feel crazy." Ethan's face hardened. "So what, you're leaving?" I took a breath that tasted like grief and freedom at the same time. "I'm choosing survival," I said. "For me, for Mia." He opened his mouth. Anger, persuasion, threat. I didn't know which would come first. But I was already past the point of needing his permission to save myself. And that was the moment the decision became real, not without loss, but with a clarity that finally felt like air. The first thing I learned about leaving is that it doesn't happen in one clean motion. It happens in dozens of small ones, quiet ones, administrative ones, the kind that don't look like courage from the outside but feel like it from the inside because every step is taken with shaking hands. That night, after I told Ethan I was choosing survival, I didn't storm out. I didn't throw a suitcase into the car. I didn't have a friend waiting with a spare room and a perfect plan. I went downstairs, made sure the doors were locked, and sat at the kitchen table until the clock turned past midnight. The house felt larger than it ever had, like the rooms were stretching away from me, making space for the life I didn't know how to live yet. Ethan stayed upstairs. I could hear him moving, drawer slams, footsteps, the low murmur of a phone call he didn't bother to hide. Once, he came halfway down the stairs and stopped. "You're really doing this," he said. It wasn't a question. It was disbelief, like I'd broken a rule he thought I'd never dare to touch. I looked up at him and felt a strange calm. "Yes," I said, "I am." He stared for a moment, jaw clenched, then turned away like the sight of my certainty offended him. I slept in Mia's room that night, on the floor beside her bed. I told myself it was because she liked when I was close, because she'd had a nightmare earlier in the week. The truth was simpler. I didn't want to be under the same roof as Ethan and feel like I was trespassing in my own marriage. In the morning, Mia woke up and blinked down at me, confused. "Mom, why are you on the floor?" I smiled too quickly. "I fell asleep reading," I lied. She accepted it because children accept the stories adults give them. That's their love. That's their vulnerability. The next week moved like a storm made of paperwork. I called a lawyer during my lunch break and sat in my car with the windows cracked, sweating even though it was cold outside. My hands shook as I explained the recording, the hotel charge, the way Ethan had threatened regret. The lawyer's voice stayed calm, which made me feel both relieved and heartbroken. Calm meant this was common. Calm meant I wasn't special. Calm meant people did this to each other every day. I opened a new bank account with only my name on it and transferred a small amount of money at first, just enough to breathe. I felt guilty while doing it, as if I were stealing from a marriage that had already stolen my peace. I gathered documents quietly, Mia's birth certificate, our insurance paperwork, school forms. Each paper felt like a brick in a new foundation. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was survival in a plain shirt and tired eyes. Ethan noticed, of course. He noticed everything once it threatened his control. He began to shift between extremes. One day he was cold, silent, punishing. The next day he was soft, almost gentle, the man I used to recognize. He brought home flowers. He offered to take Mia to the park so you can rest. He spoke to me like nothing was broken, as if ignoring reality could force it back into shape. "I've been thinking," he said one evening, leaning against the counter like he was trying to look relaxed. "We don't need to do this. We can fix it." Fix it? The words sounded reasonable, mature, until I remembered he still hadn't admitted what I heard. "Then tell me the truth," I said. His expression tightened and the softness vanished. "You're stuck on that recording," he snapped. "You're obsessed." And there it was again. The refusal, the rewriting, the demand that I doubt my own ears. "I'm not stuck," I said quietly. "I'm anchored, there's a difference." The hardest part wasn't the logistics. The hardest part was Mia. Because in every decision, her face appeared like a question. "Are you keeping me safe?" I didn't want her to become the messenger between two adults. I didn't want her to feel like she had caused the collapse. I didn't want her to carry the weight of that recording like a secret she didn't ask for. So I sat her down on a Sunday afternoon while Ethan was out, and I chose my words like they were glass. "Mia," I said, brushing her hair back behind her ear, "sometimes grown-ups have problems they can't fix by themselves." Her eyes widened slightly. "Like when I fight with my friend and we need the teacher." "Kind of," I said, "but bigger." She stared at the carpet for a second, then looked up. "Are you and Dad fighting because of my video?" My chest tightened so fast I almost couldn't breathe. "No," I said immediately, firm. "Sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing, your video didn't cause anything. It just happened to be there." She swallowed. "Are you going to leave?" The directness of children is both mercy and pain. They don't circle the truth. They walk straight into it. I took a breath. "Things might change," I said, "but I want you to know this. No matter what happens between me and Dad, you are loved. You are safe, and you will never have to choose." Her lower lip trembled. She tried to be brave because she'd watched me do it, and the sight nearly broke me. "Will Dad still come to my games?" she whispered. "Yes," I promised, because I intended to make that true if it could be. "We will both show up for you." She nodded, and then she leaned into me, arms tight around my waist. I held her and let the grief move through me like weather. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't dramatize. I just held her, feeling the old life crack and the new one begin, both at once. When Ethan found out I'd spoken to her, he exploded. "You told her," he shouted, and his voice filled the kitchen like smoke. "I told her what she needed to know," I said, steady. "She's not stupid, Ethan. She feels everything." "You're turning her against me," he accused. The familiar script. The same play. Blame me, make me the villain, make my protection look like an attack. "I'm protecting her," I said, "from the tension you think she can't hear." He stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You're doing this to punish me." "No," I said, and the calm in my voice surprised even me. "I'm doing this because I refuse to raise our daughter in a house where truth is treated like betrayal." He stared, breathing hard, and for a second I saw something flicker, fear maybe, because he could threaten and manipulate when I was uncertain. He couldn't when I was clear. A week later, I found a small apartment 10 minutes from Mia's school. 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy. The kind of place you'd overlook if you weren't looking for refuge. When I walked through it the first time, the rooms echoed. It smelled like fresh paint and emptiness. I should have felt only sadness. Instead, I felt something else too, relief. Because for the first time in months, my inside matched my outside. My face didn't have to pretend. My body didn't have to tense every time a phone buzzed. The air felt honest. Moving was both heartbreaking and strangely clean. I packed Mia's clothes first, her favorite hoodie, her soccer uniform, her stuffed rabbit with one ear bent. I packed my own things last because I kept tripping over memories. A mug Ethan bought me on our anniversary, a sweater he loved, a photo from a beach trip where I'd believed in us with my whole chest. I left some things behind on purpose, not because I didn't want them, but because I didn't want my new life built out of old illusions. The first night in the apartment, Mia fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the change. I sat alone at the small kitchen table, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant noise of another family through the wall. Loneliness arrived like a tide. But beneath it, steadier was peace. Not happiness, not yet. Peace, the absence of pretending, the quiet that comes when you stop arguing with reality. I opened my notes app and stared at the phrases I'd written from the recording. Plan, messages, hotel, handle it. They looked smaller on the screen than they had felt in my body. And that was when I understood something that surprised me. Healing wasn't going to come from forgetting those words. Healing was going to come from finally understanding what I had tolerated long before the recording ever existed. How I'd mistaken control for love, silence for stability, and endurance for virtue. I turned off the light, lay down in my new bed, and listened to my daughters breathing in the next room. For the first time in a long time, I believed my own reality. And that belief felt like the beginning of everything. It's strange what becomes your turning point. People assume life changes when something loud happens, an affair confessed, a suitcase dragged to the door, a scream that finally breaks the silence. But my life changed because my daughter wanted to make a movie. A phone, a family dinner, a child's laughter. And then playback. For a long time, I couldn't say that without feeling sick. I couldn't think about Mia holding that old phone with both hands without a flare of guilt, because it felt like her innocence had lit the match, like her curiosity had opened the door. But with distance, I've come to understand something that took me months to hold without shaking. My daughter didn't break my marriage. She revealed it. There's a difference. A painful one, a necessary one. In the beginning, after I moved out, I thought healing would feel like relief right away. Like freedom would taste sweet. Instead, it came in contradictions. Some mornings I woke up light, breathing deeper than I had in years, and I'd have this strange moment where I forgot the recording, forgot the lies, forgot the way my own home had turned into a place where I questioned myself. And then the memory would return, sharp as cold water, and I'd sit up in bed with my heart pounding like I was back on that couch, hearing Ethan's voice say, "She trusts me." Other days, grief hit me in the grocery store aisle because I passed the brand of coffee Ethan liked, or in the car because a song came on that we used to play on road trips. Grief doesn't ask permission. It arrives like weather, and you learn to stand in it until it passes. But slowly, beneath the grief, something stronger began to grow. Clarity. When you're inside a marriage, you tell yourself stories to survive it. You call neglect busy. You call coldness stress. You call disrespect a rough patch. You smooth over the jagged parts because you want the whole thing to stay intact, especially when there's a child involved. You tell yourself love means enduring. You tell yourself leaving means failing. After the recording, I realized I'd been telling myself stories for years. Not because I was weak, because I was loyal, because I believed love was supposed to be a shelter. But a shelter that requires you to pretend you aren't cold is not a shelter. It's a performance. Looking back now, I can see the pattern with painful clarity. The way Ethan had always preferred control to conversation. The way he'd answer questions with sighs and eye rolls until I learned not to ask them. The way he'd correct me with that calm voice that made other people think he was reasonable and made me feel like I was too much. The way "trust me" became a command instead of a comfort. I didn't notice it then because it happened gradually. Like a room getting darker one shade at a time until you forget what full light looks like. The recording didn't create that darkness. It simply turned the lights on. And the first time you see clearly after years of dimness, it hurts. It hurts because you realize how much you accepted, how much you explained away, how many times you silenced yourself because you wanted peace more than truth. I used to think strength was staying. Now I know strength is telling the truth, even when it costs you the life you planned. Mia adjusted faster than I expected and slower than I hoped. Some days she treated the apartment like an adventure. New neighborhood, new routines, new little rituals like Saturday pancakes that became ours. Other days she asked questions that gutted me. "Why can't we all live together?" she asked once, standing in the doorway with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. I knelt in front of her, careful with my hands and my voice. "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people," I said. "And when that happens, it's my job to keep you safe and to keep myself safe too." She frowned. "Did Dad hurt you?" Kids always find the center of things. They don't get distracted by the details. They aim for the truth. I swallowed. "He hurt my trust," I said, "and trust is important." She thought about that quietly, then nodded, as if she was filing it into the part of her heart that was learning how the world works. That conversation changed me, because I realized that every day, whether I meant to or not, I was teaching my daughter what love looks like. If I stayed in a marriage where truth was punished and deception was protected, what would she learn? That relationships are endurance tests. That a woman's role is to keep the house intact no matter what happens inside it. That family means smiling through damage. I couldn't hand that to her. So I began to redefine family in my own mind. Family isn't a photo. It isn't a shared last name. It isn't the illusion of togetherness. Family is where you can breathe. Family is where you can speak without fear. Family is where you are not managed like a problem. Sometimes family is two homes and one child who is loved in both. Sometimes family is a mother who chooses herself so her daughter learns she can choose herself too. Ethan and I learned how to co-parent like strangers learning a new language. At first it was tense, messages clipped, exchanges stiff. He tried to play the victim in small ways, hinting that I was overreacting, that I was breaking the family apart. There were moments I doubted myself, because doubt is a habit that doesn't disappear overnight. But each time I replayed the memory of his voice, the calm cruelty of "she trusts me," my doubt quieted. Because the truth is simple. If a marriage can't survive the truth, then it was never safe. That sentence became a kind of anchor for me, not because it erased the pain, but because it gave the pain meaning. I didn't leave because I wanted to punish him. I left because I wanted to stop punishing myself. The most unexpected part of all this has been the peace. Not constant peace, life isn't that kind, but a steadiness I didn't know I was missing. I laugh more easily now. I sleep deeper. I don't feel my stomach drop when a phone buzzes in the next room. I don't rehearse conversations in my head before speaking, afraid I'll be told I'm too emotional or too dramatic. For the first time, my thoughts don't have to hide inside me. And that has made room for something else too. Forgiveness. Not the kind that excuses what happened. The kind that releases me from living in it every day. Forgiveness, for me, has looked like accepting that I may never know every detail, that I may never get a full confession delivered with perfect remorse. That closure might not come from him at all. It might come from me. From choosing my own clarity over his denial. From choosing a life where my daughter grows up seeing her mother stand in the truth and survive it. Sometimes I still think about that dinner, the warmth, the laughter, the way I believed in us so completely that it felt like a fact. And I grieve that version of my life because it was real to me, even if it wasn't real to him. But then I remember, the recording didn't end my marriage. The truth did. And truth, even when it arrives through a child's innocent game, is not the enemy. It's the thing that saves you from wasting your whole life in a story someone else is writing. So I'll leave you with the question that still echoes in my chest, the one I wish I never had to ask, and the one that changed everything anyway. If you heard what I heard, would you have stayed?